The Detroit Pistons seem to have two targets in free agency that they're really fond of, and sounds like they're going to be going after in Jerami Grant and Cam Johnson. The question I have is, how much is too much money to send at one of those guys to bring them to Detroit? We're going to talk about that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime. Later on in the podcast, we'll talk about possible Bojan Bogdanovic destinations. 3 teams that I've identified in the draft that the Pistons, if they do want to move on from Bojan, I think could be interested for his services and could get the Pistons another first-round pick. Maybe it doesn't, but these are 3 teams I think maybe could get the deal, or the Pistons could get the deal done with. And then even later on in the podcast, we'll talk about the Pistons needing to do a better job this offseason and moving forward of using ways to improve upon the margins. You guys will see what I'm talking about later on. But the first thing we got to talk about is how much is too much money to spend in free agency. So on the last podcast, we talked about a report from, or not a report, but James Edwards III, Detroit Pistons beat writer of The Athletic, recently wrote, and these have been rumors all throughout the last few months, but James wrote about this recently, that the Pistons are going to be interested in Cam Johnson and Jerami Grant in free agency. And that if you're looking for the Pistons to get better, what looks like the most obvious, what's the best way? The highest probability way of them improving this offseason is through free agency. Going after one of those guys in free agency. It's not going to be through some big trade probably. It's not going to be from, packaging a bunch of young assets that go to cash in on the guy. That's not what they're going to do. They're going to spend their money in free agency, and they're going to try to go after one of these guys. So, with that being said, first thing I want to say is both guys, I feel like, obviously, solve some issues with the Pistons and would make this team better. Troy Weaver, after the season, talked about how this team desperately needs 3-and-D wings. And I've talked about it all last season. I talked about it as soon as the season ended. I've talked about it as much as possible. I think the Pistons' wing room was probably the worst wing room in the entire NBA. It was awful. It was terrible. They have to improve it. And I guess this is another thing I should probably say. Based on some of the things the beat writers have written and some of the things that I've heard, and combined with some of the things that Troy Weaver said, you combine all those things, for me, it seems like Troy Weaver, as of this moment, has a core that he believes in, is like the rotation, and he just wants to add people to that core and let these guys develop, and he believes in this core. And the core is Cade, Ivy, Duren, Stu, Killian, and Livers. Those 6 guys, it seems to be who Troy Weaver believes is his core that he wants to add to and try and empower those guys to continue to develop and get better. Now, Wiseman, obviously, they traded Sadiq Bey for him. They'd like to see Wiseman get better, but I don't think Wiseman is in that core of guys. I don't think they feel as strongly about Wiseman. He's just kind of like a chance they're taking on. But those 6 guys, it sounds like from everything that I've read, things that I've heard, those are the 6 guys that Weaver really believes in being a part of the rotation. Doesn't mean they're all going to be stars or superstars or all-stars, whatever. Just guys that he believes will be a part of their rotation moving forward and he wants to build with. So taking into account those 6 guys, what they've needed, and I've said this before in the podcast, is some wings that empower them, some role players that empower them and put them in the best positions possible to succeed. And Jerami Grant and Cam Johnson both would do that. So if the Pistons were to get either of them, forget about the money for a second. Once you saw them on the court, I feel like that it would help a lot, and a lot of people would be happy watching them on the court with these guys, because I feel like both of them definitely would help. So this isn't talking about their basketball ability, whether they actually fit with the team, etc., etc. Because I think they both do. I think they both make the team better, and they both definitely fit with what they need. The question is, how much is too much money to sign those guys for? Because just because they would do great things for you, just because they fit with what your team needs, doesn't mean you can just give them a blank check. There's a line for everybody. There's a line that you don't want to cross for everybody. The Pistons are going to have to overpay for whatever free agent they bring to Detroit. And that's just how it's going to go, especially restricted free agent like Cam Johnson. But any kind of free agent that has multiple suitors, the Pistons are going to have to overpay to get them to come to Detroit, because Detroit, whether we like it or not, is just not a free agent destination. If you go back a few years when they first signed Jerami Grant, they signed him to a contract that was thought of at the time as an overpay to get him from Denver to come to Detroit. That's just what they're going to have to do. So how much of an overpay is too much? So with Cam Johnson, I'm bringing up a report from about a month ago. It says here, from Hoops Hype, it says 6 NBA executives told them that they believe Cam Johnson's market value around his market value is 4 years, $90 million, which is around $22.5 million a year. So that's what they believe his market value is. How much, and he's a restricted free agent, so if you're going to try to get him from Brooklyn, we've talked about how it's going to be hard to do that. Restricted free agents rarely ever leave their team unless it's sign and trade or the team just doesn't want them. It doesn't happen a ton at all. So if you want to get him away from Brooklyn, and let's just assume now that market value could change. That could not be the case anymore. But let's just go off of that. If $22.5 million is what his market value is per year, like annually, in a 4-year, $90 million contract, how much is too much for the Pistons to go? I've said in the podcast before, $25 million is the most I'd like to go. And then each million you go above that, I'm less and less comfortable. So I'd say the most I'd want to go over for Cam, like, if they were to go to $30 million, I would not be comfortable with $30 million. I think that's too much for Cam Johnson. I love him as a player. I think he fits exactly what the Pistons need. But I think even then, his ceiling is capped. And there's not much, I don't believe there's much more for him to grow into. You're basically overpaying for what he is right now to just be who he is. Like, you're not asking him to take another step. You're not paying him because you believe he can grow into that contract. No, you're overpaying him for what he brings to the table. You're not expecting him to bring anything more. So I think I'd probably be okay with like $27.5 million if they went that high. I think that would be the point where it's like you overpaid for him, but it's not too much of an overpay for the guy you're getting. I understand why you did it. Once they start going higher than that, like $30 million, now I'm like, okay, that was probably way too much. And I would rather just go and spend that $30 million on like two different guys that maybe can't do everything Cam does, but maybe they can do some of what Cam does. Maybe they can provide shooting. One of them can provide defense 1 through 4. One of them can provide off-ball shooting, movement shooting, but not the defense. Like, I'd rather do that with two guys and split that contract up a little bit more than go all the way to $30 million with Cam Johnson. So that's where I'm at with Cam. With Jerami's is going to be very interesting because you need to watch what Portland does with the 3rd overall pick. If they trade that pick, Jerami's going back to Portland. They're going to try to win again with Dame, and they want Jerami back, and Dame wants Jerami back, so they're going to bring Jerami back. If they keep that 3rd pick and make the selection, that signals to me that they're going for a rebuild. They're probably going to be trading Dame, and there's no reason for Jerami to go back, and it likely means he's coming to Detroit. The thing is that he turned down a 4-year, $112 million extension with Portland in January. And it was because he could get offered way more in free agency if he did that. Doesn't mean he wanted to leave Portland. It just means it was smarter business for him to wait till free agency and then sign there because he could get offered way more. So that 4-year 122 or 112 was $28 million. According to this report right here, he's eligible for a 5-year, $233 million contract. Now, just because he's eligible for that doesn't mean that's what he's going to get, but that would be an annual contract of $46 million a year. I don't believe he's going to get the max. If he wanted the max, he's crazy. You don't do that. There's no way in hell you give him that much. But he's going to want way more than $28 million if he would have taken the contract from Portland. So he's probably going to be looking for in the ballpark, I believe, is like $35 million. Do you want to pay $35 million for Jerami Grant? I don't know, man. I just don't know if you want to go that high for Jerami Grant. It's like, I'd go like $32 million, I guess, with him. But 35, once you get 35 plus, that's a lot of money to be spending on Jerami Grant, man. And this is something I'll leave you guys with. I want to hear from you guys. If you guys think this is too much money, what's your guys' line? But I'm going to tell you guys what my belief is with the Pistons free agency. I've told you guys this many a times. I'm going to say it again. I'm aware that the Pistons have to overpay for somebody in free agency. That's how it's going to go. I'm fine with that. But what I've told you guys for the last 2 years, and I said this with DeAndre Ayton last year, and so far it looks like I would have been wrong for choosing Ayton as the guy, but the idea stays the same. The player that I'd like the Pistons to eventually overpay in free agency is a guy who is a good player, he's young, and you believe that you can develop him, and he has more things that he can unlock to where in the future he'll be worth that contract. You believe he'll grow into that contract. Maybe he'll outgrow that contract, and now you're looking like, hey, at the time it looked like a little bit too much, but we believed in his future. We believed that we could develop him, and now he's worth way more than that. Exactly what they did with Jerami Grant. At the time, Jerami Grant was looked at as an overpay, but they were bringing him here to give him a chance to have more on-ball reps, to show some shot creation, so some isolation stuff, so show more of his bag. And he did. And now he was worth way more than that $20 million. Now what was once looked at as an overpay, the Pistons overpaid for a guy they believed could develop and become better and has something more to unlock, and they were right. That's the kind of free agent sign that I'd like them to take. If they're going to overpay for somebody, overpay for someone that you believe has a higher ceiling that they've shown and you believe you can get that out of them. And I don't think that's the case with Cam. If you're going to overpay him to $30 million, I think he is who he is. And I like who he is, but I think he is who he is. And it's the same thing with Jerami. At 29, I think we've seen him take the step he can take. Now I think he is what he is. I don't think there's another step upon the last step that Jerami took. So that's why I'm a little bit hesitant on overpaying those guys. And that's where my line is. I'd like both of them on the team. But there's a line for too much money, and that's my line. So let me know what you guys' line is for too much money to offer Cam Johnson and Jerami Grant. Let me know that in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. When we come back, I got 3 teams that I think if the Pistons wanted to trade Bojan Bogdanovic for another first-round pick, I believe could be interested in his services. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, I've got to tell you guys about one of our sponsors, Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you have. Forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and roll for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. It's just 2 taps and you're all set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you don't have to go digging through your email, which I know we all have hundreds of emails that we just haven't checked through. You have to scroll through and try to find your tickets. Don't have to go through that with Gametime. It gets sent directly to your phone. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed with Gametime. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So also that's been talked about lately and also was mentioned in James Edwards III's article recently about the Detroit Pistons, obviously, was that it's possible that the Pistons use Bojan to get another pick. It's possible they use Bojan in a trade this offseason. And he also, James, that is, said in his article that he believes it's more likely the Pistons trade for another first-round pick, try to get multiple first-round picks, rather than it is likely for them to trade their 5th overall pick and not have any first-round pick. So that's left me to talk about this. And it's something that I've said for a few months now that I would have liked the Pistons to do, which was trade Bojan for another first-round pick. I think it's becoming more and more likely that that may be the case as the draft comes along. Now, they may not do it. I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I think it's likely that they'll use Bojan to maybe trade for another first-round pick in this draft. This draft is heavy on wings. It has a lot of talent in this draft, in this first round. You can find really nice value all throughout the first round, and wouldn't shock me at all if Troy Weaver wanted to get another first-round pick to get a guy that he really likes on the wing. So, with that, I went and looked for 3 teams. 3 teams in the first round that potentially could be interested in Bojan Bogdanovic and his services and could give the Pistons one of their first-round picks. The first team, before I get to these 3 teams, here's my hypothetical dream scenario. My dream scenario would be if the Pistons could move 5 and Bojan to Orlando for 6 and 11. Now, I don't know if I don't think Orlando would even want Bojan. I don't know if they have any interest or would have any interest in Bojan. I don't know if they would have any reason or want to move up to 5 if there's a guy at 5 that they really want, they think that Detroit will take. I don't know. So I don't know if they would even want to do that. But that would be like my dream scenario. If they could use Bojan and 5 to get 2 picks in the lottery, that would be super dope. That's a dream scenario, but I don't think it's likely. So anyways, now let's move on to the 3 teams that I've identified in the first round that I think the Pistons could trade Bojan for. So first team is Indiana. Indiana, a few months ago, or at least last month, I believe, either last month or a few months ago, reports came out that they are not looking to use all of their first-round picks and that they're looking for more vet players to help them win now with Tyrese Halliburton, who absolutely broke out this past season, with Miles Turner, with Benedict Mathurin, and some of the other guys that they have. They're looking for some win-now guys to try to take that next step, and they're willing to use some of their assets to get those guys. So I think it's a perfect match in heaven then. Come get Bojan. Bojan's a veteran. He would help them win games. He would help them get a lot better. And they have 2 late first round picks. They have 26 and 29. Now, if I was the Pistons, I would try to package Bojan in 31 to move up to 26 and 29. I think maybe Indiana would bite on that. I think that honestly is a good deal for both sides. So that's the one team I think is the most likely for the Pistons to try to engage with if they want to move off of Bojan and get a first-round pick, because Indiana, it's already been said that they're very interested in trying to get some win-now vets. They got late first-round picks. I don't think Bojan's worth a lottery pick or a high first-round pick, but late in the first round, if you can get both those 26 and 29 picks for Bojan and 31, I think that would be a good deal. The Pistons would leave with 3 first-round picks in this draft. I think they could do some nice things with those picks. So that's the first team that I've identified in the first round that I think maybe they could do business with. The second team that I've identified is Brooklyn. Brooklyn has Mikal Bridges. It has Cam Johnson. Right now, at least, they could bring him back. They could lose him to the Pistons. Who knows? Maybe it could be a sign and trade kind of thing. But either way, it doesn't sound like they're trying to rebuild. It doesn't sound like they're willing to move off of Mikal Bridges for first-round picks. They really like Mikal. It looks like that they're trying to build around him or build with him and try to build a competitor and a really good team. They have picks 21 and 22. So if they would like to move off of one of those picks for Bojan Bogdanovic, I think the Pistons would like that. That's a late, like mid to late first-round pick right there. But again, this draft is really deep with wings in this first round. You could get really good value at this pick. Like right now, Tankathon has Gigi Jackson going 22. Gigi Jackson, a really good prospect. I really like him. So if they could get him there, that would be really nice. So that's another team I believe that if they're really trying to compete next year, they're trying to build with Mikal Bridges. That's another team that I've identified that I think could be interested in Bojan Bogdanovic and his services. And then this one's a little bit of a wild card. But Miami has the 18th pick. I know they're up against the salary cap. I haven't put it into the trade machine, but if Miami doesn't want to add another rookie, if Miami were to, like, let's say, lose these finals, and they want to try to get another player to help them win next year and move forward, and they don't want to use it on a rookie, maybe they like Bojan. Maybe Bojan for 18 helps them. Bojan would provide shooting, some offense for their team, some needed spacing, maybe some needed offensive creation outside of Jimmy Butler. So maybe that could work. Maybe Miami would be interested in Bojan. I believe they were interested in him at the deadline as well. So that's a little bit more of a wild card, but that's another team that I've identified that the Pistons could trade Bojan for another first-round pick and get a wing guy at that position. Those are the 3 teams I've identified. Again, Miami's a little bit of a wild card, but I can see all these 3 happening if the Pistons are indeed trying to move off of Bojan and they want another first-round pick. I think it would be smart to get another first-round pick. Really nice draft class. Add 2 wings in this class. Go get your guy in free agency if it's Cam Johnson or Jerami Grant. You now have made enough room for all 3 of those guys. You have a fine rotation now of wings, and I think that would be good. And hopefully the idea is that the guys you're bringing in aren't going to be severely, taken advantage of defensively like Bojan was throughout last season. He provides offense, but the Pistons' defense was horrific, and they need to add some wings that can do both, or at least play defense and run on offense. Like, that's what they need. So if they wanted to do this, I think it would make a lot of sense for him to move Bojan for another first. But you guys let me know. Do you guys agree with any of the 3 teams that I've mentioned? Is there a team that I didn't mention that you guys believe could be interested in Bojan, would make sense for Detroit? Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at KukaHill. When we come back, I think the Pistons need to do a better job of using their 2-way contracts and second-round picks. We'll talk about that when we come back. But first, you guys got here for some of our lovely sponsors. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So before we dive into this topic, I wanna shout out this person. I'm gonna suggest you guys go follow him on Twitter. His name is Piston, or his Twitter account is Pistons Draft Talk at PDT Scouting. He has really good connections within not just the Pistons scouting department, but the NBA, a lot of connections throughout the NBA scouting department, across the NBA draft stuff. He's a scout himself, an aspiring NBA draft analyst. Like, he's really, really good, knows his stuff, talks with a lot of people, knows what he's talking about, knows what people are saying. Like, he knows all kinds of stuff about this. So I suggest all of you guys to go follow him on Twitter. Because he provides a lot of insight and tells you a lot of things that he's hearing and being told behind the scenes amongst NBA draft stuff. So anyways, the reason why I bring him up is because I've been doing some Twitter spaces lately, and he comes up and we've been talking a lot. And he brought up something a few times now over the last few weeks. And that's the fact that the Pistons, compared to the rest of the league, have not done a great job of utilizing their 2-way contracts in the selections they've made in the second round. And a lot of these second round picks and a lot of these 2-way contracts have been favors done to an agent, favors done to, what's the right word here? Someone you have a relationship with. They've done a lot of favors instead of really trying to utilize those 2-way contracts to get some guys that could potentially be impactful, that actually have some NBA aspirations, has potentially an NBA future. Now, these are 2-way contract guys. These are second round guys. It's not, you don't find those guys all the time. That's why they're in the second round. That's why they're 2-way guys. But the Pistons don't utilize them to the best of their abilities. For example, Buddy Boeheim clearly was used, and this is no disrespect to Buddy, but this was clearly a favor done to his family and to someone that they're close with, his father. There's no reason why he should have been a 2-way contract. It was not worth it. There's some other things that PDT has told us about some second round picks. I'm not going to say which ones. I'm not going to say that on the podcast. So if you guys want to join a Spaces one time and listen to what he has to say, go ahead and ask him some questions. I'm not going to say their names in the podcast because I don't feel like comfortable doing so. But there's been some second round picks that weren't necessarily the best picks at the time or the best pick possible, but it was a favor done to an agent. It was, a draft and stash like Gabriel Procida. He probably won't ever, he may be a good prospect, but he probably won't ever be on the Pistons team. And he was only drafted because they wanted to save a spot. They didn't want to have to pay another guy, so they just picked any draft and stash guy. Give me the best draft and stash guy on the board. Okay, that's him. Okay, send him over there. Like, that's who we're picking. That's basically what they did. So I'd like it this offseason if the Pistons actually utilize their second-round picks, if they actually utilize their 2-way contracts on some undrafted free agents, on some guys that actually could be impact players in the NBA, some guys that they believe they could develop to become some impact players in the NBA. Like, throughout the season, the Pistons don't even use their 2-way guys. Like, until the end of the season, they don't even utilize them. They barely ever utilize them. And I don't think, and for as much talk they've made about the G League being right next to the arena and wanting to use it as a developmental thing, outside of, I think Isaiah Livers is the only person that they've used that with to really try to develop somebody. And he's impactful. He's fine. He's a good pick. But, like, I don't even know if you can really say that, because the only reason why he probably was down there because he was coming off of injury with his, I believe it was his foot coming out of college. That's the only reason why he was down there. So it's not like they're even really utilizing their G League to try to develop like they said they would. So I just think that moving on from this offseason, moving forward, I really would like them to really try to utilize that G League to try to be like the Miami Heat, try to be like the Toronto Raptors, when they're actually utilizing these 2-way contracts on guys they believe have an NBA skill that could help them and they could develop, become basketball players in the NBA, some impactful players in the NBA. I think that's the one thing the Pistons have been lacking. There's been a few things that they're lacking, but I think that's low-key something that's been lacking that hasn't really gotten a lot of talk, and I hope it's something that changes this offseason. So that's all I've got to say today, man. Let me know what you guys think about that. Do you guys agree with me? Do you guys disagree? Again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Cougar Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe. Enjoy these finals. Until next time, peace out.